Thank you for joining us during Oslo Innovation Week. My name's Rob Jackson. I'm a partner at Dehns, one of Europe's leading firms of patent and trademark attorneys, which has been working with Norwegian innovators, startups, spin-outs, SMEs and multinationals for the past 50 years. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by 3 NTNU startups. And together, we'll look at some of the strategies developed and implemented by the startups at NTNU to mitigate the challenges presented by COVID-19, and also how they're future-proofing their businesses through innovation and strong IP strategy. During today's event, you'll hear from Erik Dyrkoren, co-founder and CEO of Zeabuz. Erik has an MSc in mechanical engineering from NTNU and Georgia Tech, and is currently undertaking an MBA at NTNU NUS Singapore. He has worked for Schlumberger in Kazakhstan, the European Space Agency in the Netherlands, and Marine Tech in Trondheim, where he managed a national research coordination program. He founded Blue Eye Robotics together with partners in 2015 and was CEO until the end of 2019, taking the company from scratch to the global market. Early in 2020, Erik joined Zeabuz as co-founder and CEO. Zeabuz aims to revitalize urban waterways in smart cities by delivering a new service of urban emission-free autonomous passenger vehicles. Secondly, we have Vebjørn Slyngstadli, CEO and co-founder at Diri. He has 22 years of experience in the IT industry, and during that time has worked as a technician, consultant, advisor, and CIO. Diri provides a brand new and unique cybersecurity risk assessment product originating from the cybersecurity community at NTNU. Our third and final presentation from NTNU will be from Brage Strand, CEO of Mobai. Brage is an NTNU alumni with past life as a consultant and business developer with expertise in energy, telecoms, information technology, and finance. Mobai is a spin-out startup from the Norwegian biometrics laboratory at NTNU. Their product enables identification through biometrics and prevents biometric-related fraud by using biometric samples to detect attacks on facial recognition systems, while also providing technology to use biometrics in digital signatures. You'll also hear from 2 of my colleagues at Dehns. Neil Campbell is a European and UK patent attorney and partner at Dehns in the chemistry, pharmaceutical and chemical engineering group. Neil handles patent work for a variety of clients, from sole inventors and startup companies to large multinational corporations. We also have Sam Cleary, a European and UK patent attorney and an IP consultant at Dehns. Sam works with startups on capturing innovative ideas and commercializing them, even from the very early stages in their life cycle. Sam helps startups with their IP strategy, drawing on his experience of building an intellectual property portfolio for clients from grassroots level, and works with organizations to help set up their business goals from an innovation and IP perspective. So that's our introductions done. Following the presentations, we'll have a panel discussion and Q&A session, which will cover the key learning points from the last few months and advice for startups and SMEs for the next few months and for planning effectively for the future. So please do submit any questions you have by the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your screens, and we will try to address all of your questions during the discussion at the end. To begin with, I'll hand over to Erik from Zeabuz.
My name is Erik Dyrkoren. I'm CEO and co-founder of Zeabuz. Thanks for joining. I'll now share my presentation with you. So, yeah, Zeabuz is a startup from NTNU that was founded last year, and our aim is to revitalize urban waterways with autonomous ferries. And this is a future vision of the ferries that we're now developing. A little bit larger than the ones that we have currently in prototypes, but it gives a direction of where we're going. So the problem that we're set to solve here is that the urban environment around the world looks very much like what we see here from a picture from Seoul in Korea, where the roads, the land roads, a bit like that, are filled with cars and traffic moves slowly, while next to it is a waterway that is literally empty. And the waterway was the reason those cities are built there in the first place, and now we hardly use them anymore because road transport has been so much more efficient, at least locally. And utilizing those waterways is expensive using traditional ships and boat technology, and also building bridges will make, well, it's expensive and will also block waterways for trawl boats. It's not an easy situation to do anything with, and you can see this picture all over the world. Many cities are founded near waterways, and that's also a great opportunity. So these waterways are definitely underutilized and can be used to secure further city growth in a sustainable way, while giving citizens a much more higher quality of life if you can use them then with greener technology, smarter solutions. So in general, moving passenger flow onto urban waterways we see as a sustainable, efficient, and compelling solution for cities and citizens, and a huge business opportunity all over the globe. Our solution is sustainable waterborne mobility through small, zero-emission, autonomous passenger ferries in an integrated mobility system. Integrated in the sense that we see network of these ferries operating in larger cities, like we just saw in Seoul or London, Stockholm, cities like that, with lots of water surrounding them, while also being integrated in other modes of transport that should also be emission-free and connected in a smart manner. These ferries or our system is can be documented to also help reach 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. I'm happy to go into how in a different session where I have more time, but it's definitely something to be proud of, that we can say 4 of them are within our domain. So the Zeabuz mobility system, it's consists of many parts. It's much more than just a ferry. The ferry in itself may be the easiest part. We know how to build boats all around the world, but what we're most concerned about is the situational awareness and collision avoidance parts. Those parts that make up the autonomy. In the center of it all is the user experience. We need to make this safe, and we need to make this appealing to users so that we actually use it. It's autonomous, which means that it's there's no crew on board, and we need then a remote control center on top of that. A docking center system, and also data acquisition to monitor everything remotely from our home base. So it's and we see a huge potential for this technology. We have calculations that show that in the 100 largest cities in Europe, 4,000 ferries like this may be installed, and much more globally, of course. A little bit about autonomy, since that's our core. It's sometimes mistaken for the same as automation. Automation is something that's been on the shelves around the world for quite some time. Autopilot is another name for that, or dynamic positioning. We see that even available for leisure boats. Putting points A and B in, and the boat will go there by itself. But it needs a driver or a skipper to tell the boat if there's anything danger in the way. And that's where autonomy comes in, using sensors for object detection, and then fusing all those sensor data together to make a situational awareness before doing a navigational decisions and avoid collisions with objects or other things in the water. That's what it's the core part of the Zeabuz company and technology is. The autonomy platform uses proven methods adapted for specific operating environment, meaning that we will install these ferries and cancel out all fixed objects and only look for those objects that are foreign and may form some sort of avoidance or hindrance on the path. We don't do this alone, of course. We do this in cooperation with many, and We have many partners already. We are looking for more to fill our whole ecosystem required to deliver this advanced and complex and interesting system to the world. In this is also an interesting possibility is that autonomy in itself is a research project, being researched or look for a commercial solution for around the world. Like Google have their Waymo system installed in Phoenix, and we have Uber, and there's many other companies working in the maritime domain. Many realizing that autonomy in general is very, very complicated to make work commercially. And that's why we also have selected this short distance ferry solution where the environment is easy to understand, the speeds are low, and the margins given to the autonomy system to make decisions is so large that we can actually make it work commercially within a short amount of time. And we have prototypes here in Trondheim operating as living labs, and the one you see in this picture is one that is in construction right now, and Zeabuz will, together with NTNU and partners, operate that next year here in Trondheim, which will be the first of its kind in the world. So why Zeabuz stay strong despite the pandemic? We have set out to solve global problems, which in itself, we say, will not go out of date even if you have a pandemic. People will still, we will probably still see urbanization and more need for green solutions. And autonomy in itself will enable the use of waterways in a whole different fashion, because you remove the need for a crew on board and thereby removing the most costly elements. So we can do a 24/7 operation of ferries on these waterways with a minimum cost. And Zeabuz also is founded by a very experienced team. Myself and 3 others are serial founders and have done this before, more or less, creating companies with success. We also have highly skilled experts in the field of autonomy on the team. We are 14 founders altogether, which may be required because of the complexity of making this system actually work. We have a business model, which I am happy to discuss with you on a different time, that is scalable and adaptable to the things we will learn along the way, as embracing the idea that entrepreneurship is a lot about being adaptable and looking for opportunities and make those commercially viable. Norway's response to COVID-19 has also actually been a little bit of help to Zeabuz in the last 6 months, since the grants given to innovation projects and startups have been strengthened and given Zeabuz more cash to get started than normally would have been the case from the government, which has been very helpful since investors have been more tricky to talk to than normal. However, since our business model and idea is future-proof, we see now that investors are embracing the Zeabuz company, and we see that we are fit for partnerships with good investors as well. So that concludes my presentation today. So it's then my turn to hand over to Vebjørn Slyngstadli from Diri to discuss his experience during this time.
Yes. Thank you for giving me the microphone, Erik. It's interesting to see how innovations is growing in Norway and in NTNU. We want to present this new product to you. And my name is Vebjørn Slyngstadli. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the company, together with my fellow co-founder, Gaute. And it's really nice to see so many that you can attend us here today. And our focus today on this session will be on risk assessments. And the product we have developed will help you to discover and manage risks in your company, and to help you build a digital foundation. And if you have IT infrastructure that is more or less like this picture, then we are here to assist you in creating a better foundation. And in many cases, if you have a bad foundation like this, this could be the end of business for many people. We want to be there to make sure that you are in business. It's a quite young company. It was established in May this year. And the project is based on many years of research by Dr. Gaute from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology at NTNU. And Gaute and I have been working together for some years now in NTNU, and we have seen the endless need of security specialists internally in NTNU. And we have discovered that there must be around 800 systems in NTNU in the university. And our tools is showing this, that we have around 6,000 to 8,000 applications on our PCs. And trying to do a risk analysis of all this and building a solid foundation was not easy without a proper tool. So this is why we started to build the product. And NTNU Technology Transfer, NTNU TTO, has been really helping us in this period of time to make sure that we could bring our ID or innovation out in the market as well, because we saw that we could not develop this product only internally in NTNU. We needed more money, more funding to do so. And along the road, we found the company Congested in a town nearby, which has been really helpful in doing the development of the product itself. They're also helping out with the marketing. And as Erik said, the Norwegian government has been really supportive and helping in this period of time during the pandemic. And we see that funding has been more available now than it was before. We've also seen something else, and we have seen that the rise of cybercrime has been, and they have been more active during this period of time and during the pandemic. And we see that they're trying to exploit this situation and exploiting the fear of people to email campaigns and so on, and make sure they gain some money of it. And since our product is designed to reduce that risk, to make your business more secure, I think the timing is quite okay for the company like Diri. And something else which we also discovered, that many of this, when you do a risk analysis, many people used to meet physically into workshops, and now in the pandemic, it's harder to do this. And by using our tool, it's easier to meet and to risk assess things together in a digital arena instead. The question is your digital foundation future-proof? These days, everyone is digitalizing. We are integrating and we are automating processes all over the world. And this is true. This is also true when it comes to infrastructure built by criminal organizations and state-sponsored actors. So if you want to build a future-proof business, you need to have a solid foundation when it comes to information security. And this has to be built by hard work and a structured work, and by doing risk assessment and risk assess all your bricks in your wall. The next question is, do you know where you have your digital assets and where they are located? It is you that know the knowledge. You have the knowledge of what's important for your business. And by following this guided step-by-step process, you can secure your systems without hiring an expensive security professional. And you will be able to provide information on high-risk areas to your management. So by analyzing what's most important to you, you can make sure you have those values put into the system. And then next thing, if you know where you have your digital assets and values, and in what system you have them, what is the risk of losing them? And this is where we are trying to help you out. The product is built so you can run through a structured process to discover what security measures it's needed to make sure that you are safe. And by doing so, we help you to reduce the risk and make your business more resilient against threats into the future. In our product, both management and technical staff can work together to make sure no door is left open that should have been closed and locked. And management will at all times see the total risk picture for the business. And we see that, and we have seen that also in our organization, that the distance between the technician, who's many times see the risks, and up to management is in many cases too far. And really important risks are left alone and not mended and repaired. And after some time, they make big problems for the businesses. And in our tool, we want to aggregate those small risks so it's visible for companies' management staff. And to do this, we have created what we call the Diri guide, or the assistant. And Diri will keep watch on your fundamental security risks and your digital systems. And she will also tell you how to patch and make sure that you're safe, and showing you potential areas of damage so that you can act on them. I guess you have all been asked at some point to do a risk analysis of something. It might not be an IT system, but it might be a project, or it might be related to health or anything like that. And in most cases, we do this in Excel or even in PowerPoint. But we saw that when we tried to do 800 risk assessments in Excel, that's not scalable. And you could start with an Excel spreadsheet, and you would have some tasks that you should follow up, and then you do the next one and the next one and the next one. And after some time, you need to start all over again, and you will probably lose track along the road when you have so many systems, even if you want only 100. So that's why we saw the need of creating a more database structured solution where you can put all your assets into the database, and you can do the risk assessment through a structured process. And then you should have a much more visible risk overview. So this is the big difference from having all those spreadsheets to have one tool that has control over your risks. When you do a risk assessment, there is always some tasks coming out of it you should do. And to make sure that you don't lose don't lose track on your tasks, we have created a tool that is that can remind you on tasks that you have decided you need to do, and you can also assign those tasks to management, or you can assign them to technicians or any other person that have responsibility of fulfilling that task in your organization. And Diri will also remind you about due dates so that you don't ever forget about the important task anymore. And what we also saw that we needed some kind of track down of the tasks that are fulfilled, to make sure that we see that there is a positive trend in mending risks. And we have created this graph where you can see the treatment burn down. And all these red tasks is things that should have been done, and the green ones is the completed ones. And you can see them following as time go by. If your graph is very red, you should probably put some focus on treating risks. This concludes the presentation from Diri. And feel free to contact us. We want to thank you for attending us and giving the microphone now to Brage.
Thank you, Vebjørn. My name is Brage Strand, and I'm the CEO of Mobai. And as Rob introduced, we are a biometrics company, and we work with facial biometrics, and we are a spin-off from the Norwegian biometrics lab at NTNU. And we focus on making facial systems secure. Because as you can see here, let's see, face systems, they can also be hacked. And here you see a quite advanced attack where someone is using a silicone mask to try to impersonate another person. And this takes some efforts, but it's a risk that face systems have to account for if they are to be secure. On the right-hand side, you see simpler attacks, just taking a photo, downloading a photo from a Facebook page and printing it. That could fool some face recognition systems that doesn't understand. They are so good that they will see that this is a face, of course, but they don't understand that this is an attack. And you can combine those into more advanced attacks. So here you see the actor in the Queen's movie. And the actor is doing movements, and you have portrayed the image of Freddie Mercury's actual face on top of his movements. So this is a deep fake where they use images and train a model specifically to impersonate Freddie Mercury and use the actual movements of a real person to do this almost real time. Again, this can be a very strong attack against facial recognition systems. And these are types of things you need to account for to make it securely. And it's quite impressive how good the technology is at this point. Another type of attacks, which is a bit similar, is targeted towards the ID documents. So here you see three persons, and it's Christoph on the left side, and you have Ulrich on the right-hand side. And the thing is that the image in the middle is not a real person. So that image in the middle is basically a merge of the ones you see on the left side and the right side. And that image has special properties. So if you get that image into, say, a passport, then that image would provide you with a positive facial recognition match with both Christoph on the left side and Ulrich on the right side. So you could basically have a completely legal passport or driver's license or any ID document, then checks all the security feature of the document, but the image itself is manipulated in a way so more people can use it. And it will fool both human controllers and facial recognition systems. And this is quite an easy attack. It's easy to make these images, and in many countries you actually provide your own passport image, so it's also easy to get it into the legal document. In the UK, for instance, you can upload your own passport image on an online platform. And we build solution for all these kinds of attacks and provide that as an APIs and software development kits and contribute with partners to build tools for actual use case. So here's an example of an actual use case, and that's basically verifying and proving your identity online. So you need your cell phone and a passport, and then you can verify that passport, that document is valid. And then you take a selfie of yourself using Mobai technology, and you're comparing that image with the passport image, detecting all kinds of attacks. And then you have proof that this person is in fact alive and has access to the passport and is the same person that is in the passport. So that's a typical use case which we are focusing on, where you need very secure facial recognition systems. And how the pandemic is affecting us, I guess it started feeling personal on 12th of March. And then at 9 p.m. in the evening, Trump had a speech basically banning travel between Europe and US. And the reason that it felt personal was that I was in Washington, D.C. That day. And we were attending this after party with the federal government in the US, and everything was a bit fussy and chaotic, wondering if we would make a flight back home to Europe. But now I'm back in Norway, and it worked out well. And I guess that's my point is that travel and communication has changed significantly for us. And I think as a startup, that's almost an asset that we can now assume that we can reach anyone in the world, and they don't have the same expectation of us coming to them or having a physical meeting, at least not in the first phases. So I think for us it's about leveraging the global customer potential and talent pool, and actually using that as an opportunity from a startup point of view. Another major reflection is that there's some big shifts in both needs and the speed of what the customers we have need. So I have one example here, and that's Mobai technology should basically be used every time you scan a passport. Every time you check someone's passport, you should use our technology. And before the pandemic, right, we were focusing on travel. We were focusing on border controls. And okay, there you have a large volumes of passport controls that you need to do securely. So that's a very interesting use case for us. But then travel patterns suddenly changed, right? That means we have to pivot, because our customers had a change in the speed of when they need things. So there's a less urgency, but there's still a long-term need. But on the other hand, the same perhaps customers even have a new need to verify the customer digitally. So then they have a more urgent need for the app solutions that I just talked about earlier. And that need becomes a lot more apparent and immediate, and they need it now. And you actually see big shift in the regulations to facilitate digital solutions that you couldn't do before, because it had requirements of a physical meeting to verify identity. So I think for us, future-proofing is about capitalizing on those immediate needs of today, finding those use cases where they have an urgent, typically need to verify the identity and use biometrics to do that verification or authentication. And then on a more long-term perspective, it's about adapting to the actual lasting shifts. For instance, I think we will be approaching the world to be a lot more touchless than we used to before. So I think you would think a lot more, how could we make this a touchless environment? And their facial recognition solutions are great at providing authentication and interactions. We are building technology that utilizes the eye region in a face. So for us, everyone using masks is an interesting opportunity, actually, because then we actually can leverage some of our assets focusing on the eye region, which are visible even when wearing masks. And as Gaute said, there's a large increase in digital fraud. We see many cases about anti-money laundering, and here typically ID checks and use of biometrics are very interesting to reduce fraud and increase security in both knowing who is doing transactions and running ongoing transaction and authenticating them. So for us, it's about also capitalizing on those urgent things, but also having the long-term vision to see these shifts, that actual shifts of the pandemic. And lastly, it's about embracing the digital world, focusing on the digital customers and talent pool, and leveraging our IP globally. So thank you for listening. And now Neil from Dehns is gonna give you some more insights.
Thank you, Brage. My name is Neil Campbell. I'm a partner in the chemical group here at Dehns. And before I talk about future-proofing from an IP perspective, just a couple of comments on Dehns. As you can see from my first slide there, it's our 100th birthday this year. We had plans for a nice party during Innovation Week, but COVID-19 has put paid to those. We're one of the largest firms of European patent attorneys, over 120 qualified staff and trainees working in all different fields, with 50 years of experience working with Norwegian and other Nordic region companies, from small startups such as the companies you've heard from today, through to the large multinationals. And there's a list of our clients there, from Equinor and Jotun, the multinationals, down to the technology transfer departments at NTNU and Oslo University in Ventu. So from an IP perspective, we see that the pandemic has highlighted the need for commercial resilience, and IP is a key consideration for your new startup in that regard. When investors are looking to invest in new businesses, they're going to want to know what IP you hold. They're going to want to know what you might be developing in terms of new IP, They're going to want to know how you're going to maximize the value of that IP, and they might want to know whether you have considered the IP of third parties and how that might affect your business. And this, taken together, we call an IP strategy. And an IP strategy can essentially be defined in various ways, but a reasonable definition is the development of a course of actions that utilizes intellectual property to enable a company to sustainably realize higher prices, increase market share, increase revenues, and maintain lower costs than the competition. And when developing this strategy, it should be linked to your business priorities and objectives so that they work together to provide the best benefit for the company. So what should you think about? Well, the core assets in the business need to be identified, and there are various types of IP protection, which I'm sure you're aware of: trademarks, copyright, designs, know-how, and of course, patents. And just on a very simple level, making sure that the brand you choose for your business is both readily identifiable, catchy, but isn't being used by another company is an obvious start. I had a client who had designed a website, prepared marketing literature, only to find out that the name that they had chosen was in use by a third party, so they couldn't use it at all. It's patents, however, that are the asset of main interest to an inventor and possibly to your investors. And many startups kind of see the patent as a means of providing a monopoly over a particular invention to stop it being copied by a third party. And that kind of classic model of patents is kind of how the pharmaceutical industry does it. It patents a new chemical entity. That patent protects the core of the invention and offers huge value. But that classic model may not, however, be the best way forward for a startup. We have to think about other ways in which you might wish to use your IP. And interesting patents don't just provide a monopoly, they provide a way to open doors. It might allow you to collaborate with business partners. Maybe a larger company is interested in your IP and wants to help fund your startup whilst you develop the technology related to that IP. Maybe your IP might allow you to cross-license with a similar small startup or with another business, such that there's mutual benefit for the parties in terms of access to each other's IP. Maybe a joint venture could be formed. You can use your IP as a revenue generator. If you license it, you make money on a royalty. So interesting IP isn't just giving you a monopoly, use it to make some money. And even if your IP is no longer interesting to you, it might still be interesting to somebody else. You can sell it. It's an asset that you can sell to a third party. We've even had clients whose IP has allowed the startup to be acquired by a larger player. We had a large pharmaceutical giant purchase one of our small pharmaceutical startups from Sweden. They had some new technology in prostate cancer, which was of such value that this multinational German company acquired the company in a multi-billion-dollar deal, all on the back of the technology and the IP that protected it. So they should all be parts of your IP strategy, but also you need to think about how you identify your IP. You need to have systems in place to identify where you're generating your IP and how you're going to protect it. We found during lockdown that some inventors who often spend their life in a laboratory and going to meetings have had the time to write up some of their new ideas when they've been at home stuck at their kitchen table, which is now following leading to more IP in the company, because this IP has now been written up in a form that can be that can generate a patent. Many clients of ours have also used the pandemic as an opportunity to identify IP which is specifically related to the pandemic, not just in the obvious field of vaccines or in medical treatments for COVID-19, but we've seen clients registering designs for masks, or looking at contact tracing technology, or remote learning for schools. We've heard from Mobai that facial recognition technology is a big thing. How does that operate in the context of everyone wearing face masks? So there's IP in looking at that as well. So there's many opportunities which have actually arisen from the COVID crisis. Just also remember that your IP rights are a negative right. They stop others from carrying out your invention. They do not necessarily allow you to do what you want. You need to consider the rights of third parties. That's freedom to operate, and should also be part of your strategy once you're thinking of what product you might wish to launch. Some very small and quick comments on timing. You may already have a portfolio or a number of patents. You may be looking either to reduce costs in that portfolio, or maybe to accelerate certain cases that are looking particularly interesting. Talk to your patent attorney. We are experts at manipulating deadlines and costs. There's many things that we can do to slow down prosecution or accelerate prosecution in the patent system, to delay costs where necessary by extending deadlines, by missing and reinstating deadlines, by allowing deadlines to run to the final date. Talk to your attorneys, because they will have ways of manipulating those deadlines. And in most countries, there are means to accelerate cases. Perhaps you may have heard of the patent prosecution highway as one obvious way. Often those routes are not expensive. And if you have a case that's looking particularly interesting, maybe due to its links to the pandemic, then that's an opportunity that arises. So I think that if you have a coherent IP strategy, that links into your ability to secure funding. We've heard from Zeabuz and Mobai and from Diri that government funding is available, especially in Norway. But when we're looking at investor funding, having an IP strategy in order before meeting with those investors is key, because they're going to ask you about it. Having your strategy planned out, having a grasp of your IP portfolio and an idea of where you stand in terms of freedom to operate will hopefully make you stand out from the crowd and make you the company which investors choose to support. And with that, I will hand back to Rob Jackson, who will start our Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Neil, and to our other panelists for some fascinating presentations. As Neil mentioned, we'd now like to hear from our audience and open up the panel discussion. If you haven't yet submitted your questions, you can do so using the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Just to get things rolling, we've got a question which I'm going to address to Sam Cleary, who you haven't heard from yet.
Hi.
And hi, Sam. And
Yeah.
The question is as follows. I've heard that patents take years to get the patent granted, I think that is, which doesn't seem compatible with a startup looking to bring a time-sensitive or pandemic-related product to market. What advice would you give to someone looking to do that?
Okay, it's an interesting question. So normally if you're a startup, the typical pacing of the patent system is great, right? So something taking years means that the costs are kept at bay all of that time. And all the while that patent application is pending, you're creating uncertainty in the market because your competitors don't know whether or not you're going to get a granted patent, and they don't know what you'll ultimately get the protection for. And I think that uncertainty is beneficial even in a fast-moving scenario like in the current pandemic. But if, say, you had something time-critical like a ventilator or a face covering and you want to bring that to market, you might think, well, would a patent even work for that? You know, I'm working with a very short timescale. And I think that the short answer is yes. I think that having a patent application might help you to secure funding, which you might need at quite short notice. And it might also help you to protect your idea if you're starting to work with third parties, if you've got collaboration agreements in place. It's good to have your underlying IP, the background IP protected. One other thing is that it's important to know that you don't actually need the patent to be granted before you launch the product. While you do normally need the patent to be granted for it to be enforceable, it usually then has retroactive effect back to when the patent application was published, which would normally be 18 months from filing. And I think I can speak for everyone when I'd say that I hope we're not still in this situation in 18 months' time. But you can request early publications. As Neil mentioned, there are mechanisms for accelerating the process, and one of the things you can do is request early publication to get that out there sooner and set that protection clock running far sooner. And that might also be a good marketing tool, right? So being seen as one of these pioneering startups that's on top of the technology and straight out of the gate with patent applications relating to the pandemic, that might be quite a good PR move. And you can also request accelerated search and examination to get the case in front of an examiner far earlier, and that might get you a granted patent in hand sooner. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Sam. No, I'm sure that was extremely thorough answer. Thank you very much indeed for that. The next question we have is directed to our NTNU panelists. I'm going to direct this first to Erik, but then I'll pass it on to the other two speakers from NTNU. So the question is as follows. It's quite a simple one, but it's a fascinating one, I think. Knowing what you know now, is there anything you would have done differently before March 2020? Over to Erik.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for that question. I think we would have worked with investors quite a little bit differently, I guess, because it takes a little bit more time to work with that in the money market at the moment. I'm sure that would have made a little bit of difference, although we're not in trouble. It's more like you see that has shifted a little bit. But otherwise, being a startup, we in the NTNU sphere, we have most of the people and processes and technology available to us very close by, and the pandemic, as such, has not really affected us in this time. There is, I think we can sense though still that there's municipalities that we've been working with as potential customers have different priorities at the moment. I'm not sure we could have done anything about that, but that's more like what we see as a consequence of this, and let's say hopefully it will improve in the not too far future.
I think your microphone is muted, Rob, but I'm gonna chip in from Mobai. I think we had a brief discussion in Mobai if we should turn around and create some kind of fever detection prototype, use computer vision and sensors to do some at least a minimum viable product, right? And I think in hindsight, I probably would have done that. The reason we didn't was that we found some studies that said that fever detection on border crossings and different kind of scenarios where they have done it already did very little in actual reduce of infectious diseases. So we didn't see the effects, but I think from a marketing and kind of like bringing our competency out in the world, I think that might be a missed opportunity that we could have used.
Thank you, Brage. Vebjørn, have you got anything to add to that?
We're a quite young company, so we started actually after the pandemic was, so in the middle of the pandemic. So we was not able to do too much choices before, but at least we have been working probably a year before we started the company, and looking back at that period, I think we should have used more of the opportunities that was available in funding, because it was the money was quite loose at that moment. So it's harder, a little bit harder now, but I think we should have probably worked a little bit harder in that phase. We were probably sitting a little bit back and awaiting what will happen here, since we are in a position that we might leave our jobs at NTNU and start up full time in this company. It was a bit scary to just jump out this quite scary landscape, I would say, when the pandemic came. But I think working on more on funding would have been what we have changed. And one thing more, we would probably have been looking at developers, because I think there was a lot of people who was unemployed or sitting back home at their home offices and not doing too much at that time.
Thank you very much. I think we've just got a couple of minutes left. It's time for just one more question, which I'm going to direct to Sam, and then on to Neil if he's got any follow-up comments. The question is as follows. Some contractors and suppliers have commented that large buyers abuse the information gathered from suppliers during a collaborative project. They feel that they lose their IP under the guise of collaboration. Is there any advice on this topic? Sam?
Yeah, so this is a thing that gets brought up time and time again with collaboration projects. It can be quite tricky. I think it's important that you've got agreements in place with your collaboration partners early on. Even from initial discussions, just getting an NDA in place with clauses that restrict the use of any confidential information that you're handing over as part of those discussions. And then once you move into the actual collaboration itself, you typically have some kind of collaboration agreement or a joint venture agreement or anything similar to that, depending on the scenario. It's important that you have set out in that both the background and the foreground IP and who owns what and what happens under which scenarios. So it's good to have sort of a manifest of the background IP that both partners are bringing to the table, so that it's clear what existed before the collaboration, but also that it's spelled out what will happen with anything that you create together, because arguably each party probably contributed to some of the new IP, and that you don't want to have disputes in a few years' time as to who owns those various aspects. Neil, have you got anything to add?
I kind of agree with what you've said, Sam. The devil is in the detail, I always think, with these things. It's very important to make sure that the contract that you agree with between the parties is clear about who is owning the IP, where the IP exists, and it doesn't. I mean, I've come across contracts where joint ventures don't even mention IP, and inevitably, when the relationship goes a bit sour, they're in dispute because they don't know who owns what, because the original agreement didn't say anything. So I would say, as well as signing a non-disclosure at the start of the procedure, the agreement between the parties should set out who owns what at the start, so everyone knows where they stand. And if there is a dispute, the contract should set out how that dispute should be resolved, what dispute resolution procedures should there be, and hopefully I always tend to find these things rear their ugly heads when things go south, when things go wrong. When everyone's happy and the collaboration's going well, no one seems to be too concerned, but it's when the relationship breaks down that real problems occur. And that's when detail of the original contract is key.
Great, thank you very much, Neil. I'm afraid we've just run out of time, so I'll have to bring things to an end before we can take any more questions. Thank you very much to our audience for joining us. I hope everyone's found this interesting. We will be sending a copy of this webinar by email to everyone who's attended. The presentations have provided contact details for our participants, and you can find further information about intellectual property matters at our website, which is dehns.com. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.